Beta Day 2! So today I wanted to tackle the marriage equality cases that are currently before the U.S. Supreme Court. Last week the court heard oral arguments on two cases. The first one, called Hollingsworth versus Perry, was challenging California's Proposition 8, which specifically outlawed gay marriage. And the second one is United States versus Windsor, which specifically challenges the constitutionality of the Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA. Quick background for the international viewers out there: the way the United States government works, it's split into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. The legislative branch is split up between two houses of Congress: the Senate, where there's 2 senators from each state, and the House of Representatives, where the number of representatives from each state is variable dependent on the population of that state. The 2 houses of Congress then they vote and they pass bills. Those bills are then passed to the president, who signs them into law. The president is the head of the executive branch, and their job is to actually uphold and enforce the laws. The third branch of government is the judicial branch, which is basically the court system. And the courts are there to determine when laws are broken and ultimately determine the constitutionality of laws. The highest court in the country is the U.S. Federal Supreme Court. There are 9 justices of the Supreme Court, and they are like our elder council. They make the rulings that have wide sweeping effects across everyone in this country. So the first case was Hollingsworth versus Perry, and this case challenges California's Proposition 8, which was a voter referendum that specifically says, quote, the only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. This was passed as a direct response to the California Supreme Court's ruling in reference to marriage cases that said that same-sex couples had the constitutional right to marry. When that ruling passed, thousands of same-sex couples went and got married in California, and then Proposition 8 came in and was passed 52.24% to 47.76%, so a very slim margin. No same-sex couples were allowed to get married in California. So Perry, she challenged the constitutionality of Proposition 8. While this is going through the courts, there was a hold put in place. So while Proposition 8 has been ruled unconstitutional by the lower courts, marriage is still not allowed until the Supreme Court decides to rule on this case. So there's 3 scenarios that could play out depending on how the Supreme Court decides to rule on this case. They could uphold Proposition 8 and say that it is in fact constitutional, which is realistically unlikely. They could decide that Proposition 8 is unconstitutional and that same-sex couples have the constitutional right to marry, however, limit that to only the state of California, which is actually pretty likely. And then there's the broad sweeping ruling, which could determine that all same-sex couples in the entire United States have the constitutional right to marry, and it would instantly make same-sex marriage legal in every state, which, while would be ideal and is where we ultimately are going, I think, it might not be the ruling that they come back with this early in the game. So the second case is the United States versus Windsor, and this case challenges the Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA. The Defense of Marriage Act was passed in 1996 and specifically defined marriage on a federal level as between one man and one woman. The exciting thing about this case is that the traditionally conservative justices actually seem to be pretty mild, and you know, it's anyone's guess really as to how the outcome will be, but things are heavily seeming in the favor that the Defense of Marriage Act will be ruled unconstitutional, and the specific section stating that a marriage is only between one man and one woman will be struck, which will then allow same-sex couples in states where same-sex marriages are recognized to get full and equal representation and rights that heterosexual married couples have. There's actually specifically 1,100 various federal provisions that use the term marriage that would be affected. So what's next? The Supreme Court will take about 3 months to come up with their opinion and actually write their opinions up. During that time, the justices are free to change their view back and forth. It's happened in the past. It's really just a waiting game to see what comes of this. I personally predict that Proposition 8 will be found unconstitutional. However, it will be limited to just California, which will make same-sex marriages legal again in California. And the Defense of Marriage Act will be found to be unconstitutional, which will grant federal benefits to same-sex marriage in states that recognize it. So overall, it'll be a great win for marriage equality. We will have 10 states at that point, including California again, that recognize and have same-sex marriage. I think the tide is clearly changing. Look at that human rights campaign on Facebook where people use the equals sign in red to denote their stance in support of same-sex marriage. So what do you guys think? This is a really big issue for a lot of us, especially me. I plan to get married someday, and I don't see why my marriage should be any lesser than anyone else's marriage, or how my marriage would negatively impact anyone in any conceivable way than any other marriage, or even divorce. Divorce is worse for our society when you think about it than letting two people who love each other get married. So yeah, Vita Day 2. I hope you guys found this a bit informative. I didn't go into too much detail. It's actually like 11 o'clock at night, and I have to go to bed really soon. I still have to somehow edit and post this. God, working 5 days a week, 9 to 5, with a 2-hour commute each way, and doing Vita is going to be such a challenge. But I'm up for it. I'm pumped. I got some great stuff. Now I'm just ranting. Okay. Yeah. I got a busy day tomorrow. Not even sure what I'm filming. Alright, I need to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. Stay awesome. Okay. Goodbye.